If he wants to know what Conservatives would do, he should resign and find out. Mr. Speaker, until then, I'm the one asking the questions. There's a petition out there, 2 million people asking him to go. He's the one who doesn't know. He's the one who doesn't know how things work.
And she talks about a petition. We had a massive petition on the 4th of July in this country.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, the politics podcast that takes in the panoramic view from the other stage, while others bicker for the legend slot. I'm Alex Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith. Welcome to a space for people who are tired of shouted certainty and prefer hopeful nuance. And the occasional laugh.
Our ambition is simple: to bring reason, analysis and occasional levity straight to your ears, guided by one simple principle, that you're as smart as, if not smarter than us.
So turn down the lectures, put away the cliff notes and join us instead for the weekly workshop that is Quiet Riot. Quiet Riot. Welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Naomi.
And I'm Alex, the political Tweedledum to Naomi's Tweedledee.
And I'm your producer, Kenny, the show's Humpty Dumpty, always one slip away from a shattering encounter with the studio floor.
On this week's show, what do thousands of people in Ongar, Clacton, Richmond, Cambodia, Laos, Kazakhstan, Chad, Venezuela, and even 9 people in the Antarctic and 5 in Vatican City share with the world's richest man? That's right, none of them understand how elections work. We discuss the increasingly poisonous influence of Elon, I will make you like me, Musk.
Plus, there is an election coming in Germany, land of the coalition government. But who will coalesce with whom? With the Putin-loving hard right making gains in several European countries and the fate of Ukraine on the line, what is the future for the European project? To help us unpack these topics, well, there is only one person probably in the world that has as fine an understanding of the domestic as she does of the European. I am delighted to say that after years of Zoom encounters, I have finally ensnared the fantastisch, the erstaunlich, the außergewöhnlich, the brilliant Annette Dittert.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Cheers. And it's really nice seeing you for the first time.
I know. In
this little studio. It's really great. No, it's nice here.
Yeah,
Thanks.
We love it here. And we're very thrilled to have you.
We really are, especially me, because we've never really been on a show together.
Not really, no.
And last week, our guest was Kemi Badenoch, who is partial to a spot of sailing. Alex revealed that he too is an experienced seaman. And now...
Why is that fun?
I know what's coming.
I didn't know. And now I found out that, Annette, you live on a boat.
Oh, yes.
Which sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know, do you moor in the same spot, or do you like to wake up to a new scene every morning by moving on?
No, thank you very much. I mean, I'm one of the few lucky ones in London, not so few, but that group of people who live on a narrowboat with a mooring on the Regent's Canal, which is lovely.
Oh, that's nice.
And so I don't have to move the boat, but I can if I want to. And yeah, it's lovely. I mean, it's a specifically nice spot in Little Venice where there is gardens along the towpath. Oh. And in summer, it's really romantic and beautiful. And you're thinking you're in the countryside, in the middle of London at the same time. I mean, it's perfect. In the winter, maybe not so much. But I survive usually. And I have underfloor heating and German double-glazed windows.
You know, I looked at a boat before I bought my current flat. So 10, 12 years ago, I looked at a boat with mooring just off Canary Wharf. And I was so in love with it. Mm-hmm. And I would also have been neighbours with Idris Elba. And I was almost sold on it. But as listeners know, I have a massive vinyl collection, record collection. Oh. And there is literally not a single straight wall. Mm-hmm. In a boat.
Yeah. You have to be able to live with very few things.
Very few
things.
Do you
have a cat?
There is
no.
Because I know a lot of people do.
Yeah, you can. Cats. I mean, you can have kids as well. I mean, there's people who have whole families they're raising on those boats. I mean, you can also have white beams, so-called white beams, then you have a much wider, more space.
Yeah.
Mine is really small. It's a real proper narrowboat that I basically built to my own specifics, which was really cool. So I could make it exactly the way I wanted. And
so Christmas at Annette's place.
It's actually tinier than this little room here.
And probably quite good for recording a podcast.
Yeah, sound is good because double glazed windows.
Exactly. Perfect.
Are we going to be the first narrowboat studio?
There is one. There's a pod boat in
great,
Little Venice,
cool.
seriously.
Oh my goodness.
Maybe you should have a look at that.
Should. And so it came to pass that 4 months after a general election in which the Conservatives lost 251 seats, the new leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, on the day she launched a policy commission inviting ideas on what her party's policies should be, and her third ever PMQs, called for the Prime Minister to resign. Adam Bienkov reports that according to her spokesperson, this is so the Conservatives, and I quote, can have another go.
They've been out for 4 months now. Come on.
It's hardly surprising. Cries of do-over are sweeping the social platform formerly known as Twitter. A petition calling for the government to debate a general election has attracted more than 2.5 million signatures from totally real British people. The owner of X regularly reposting it to his army of totally real admirers with devastating preambles like, wow, or interesting. But listener David Foster posed a brilliant question to us on Blue Sky, and is one to which we intend to return again and again. If we separate the speaker from the criticism, does the criticism retain some merit on its own terms?
Isn't that a good question?
Of course.
Thank you, David.
Well, still, 2.5 million signatures is 1 million less than the number of votes the Liberal Democrats got at the actual election, which really wasn't that long ago. So accepting that this isn't actually how democracy works, Alex, do you think there is a number that would make this a genuine issue for Starmer?
Obviously, there is a number that would make it a genuine media issue for Starmer, but it feels like it's a range, right? So I think if it ends up going over 10 million, then it becomes just a massive news story that doesn't go away, and it becomes all about investigating who those voters are and where those voters are, and it kind of feeds itself. And then I suspect after it goes over 65 million, it becomes less of an issue. because it'll be quite self-evident that those are not real voters, you see.
Yeah.
But isn't that all they want? That this is constantly being talked about?
Yeah, I mean, there are real things sitting behind it. There is an unhappiness there. Starmer's personal approval is low. It is difficult not to really land on the incredible hypocrisy of all the people who basically spent the last decade telling us you lost, get over it.
We had 6 million.
Yeah. and who cares about your petition? Only one vote matters, the real one. Now being fully behind this. But in order to be, I guess, even-handed, I will say now what I said then, that in a democratic system, there is a thing called loser's consent. And that is not something that is offered by the losers of an election. It is something that must be sought by the winners of the election. You have to go out to the people who didn't vote for you and realize that you actually need them in order to govern a country. You need really the whole country. And it feels like Labour, for comms reasons, are not doing that at the moment. They stopped campaigning. They stopped communicating with the public the day they won.
And of course, the Brexiters did not reach out to the losers of the referendum in any way, shape or form. So it's become the status quo not to do that. Yeah. And I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
Annette, what do you think about that hypocrisy when we look at the maps that get generated by these petitions, and you look at the pro-European maps and the let's have a second referendum map, and then you look at this map of the petition calling for another general election, it's not completely the inverse of the areas, but it's not
Yeah, it's
dissimilar.
close.
There aren't many signatures in the big cities, the big urban environments, but on the pro-Remain, pro-European ones,
Yeah.
I mean, they're the darkest colours.
Clacton is like pitch black.
Exactly. So yeah, what
I mean, I think it's basically utterly ridiculous. I mean, we still live in a democracy, don't we? I mean, why would anyone even entertain that thought? In that regard, I do find Starmer's reactions to it in not really talking about it and just ignoring it mostly completely right. On the other hand, I think this is a perfect tool to constantly undermine Starmer. Elon Musk is amplifying that. And I think this can be dangerous. Because, I mean, we have now really lots of different echo chambers in these Clacton areas, Farage areas, wherever, this will be massively entertained and it will be talked about. And it is undermining the government. And especially as Starmer and this government, as you just rightly said, haven't really started to tell a tale why they are there and why they're doing all these awful things to us. This is even more dangerous. But I think these kinds of things, these days, with having Elon Musk at their side, I think this could become dangerous for Starmer. And I was wondering this morning whether he shouldn't do something about it instead of ignoring it. While I understand what the idea is behind ignoring it, to not making it bigger even. But I think in these echo chambers, it might be already quite talked about. And I think they need to tell us why they're making us suffer.
I guess since they've ticked over the number required, they can just close the petition and schedule a debate.
for 6 months' time or whatever.
Yeah.
What
So
do
they
you-
could just schedule a debate and say,
they could, of course. And
okay, let's debate why we're not going to have another election 4 months later. And then it forces, I think, them to make the argument of why,
It's an interesting-
when they've spent the last decade telling everyone else, you lost, get over it.
This is now a matter of trust. And to ask us to do it again because you don't accept the result, you cannot do this. You cannot do this. You cannot lie to the people on this scale. You simply don't accept the democratic will of the British people, and that of itself is a disgrace.
But, I mean, if we accept, though, that the media are going to kick Labour, whatever happens, and that there is an element that if they weren't shouting about this daft petition, they'd be shouting about something else. But the lies label is problematic, isn't it? Because that's one of those labels that could follow Starmer and this government right the way through to the next election. It's a very headline-friendly, it's a very poster-friendly word. But is it fair to say that Labour have brought this on themselves a lot, that there is responsibility resting foursquare on Team Starmer's
well, I think
shoulders?
there probably is on Starmer, and the criticism will be amplified as much from the left of Labour as it will be by the Faragists and the Conservatives, because they feel that he did betray them, that he promised many things during his leadership campaign which he has not delivered on or has reneged on or has gone further in terms of purging their candidates from the party, etc., etc.
Yeah, I've got to say you though. That
No. I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not
okay.
defending.
No,
I'm just saying that the Labour lies thing is a useful label and tool for enemies in lots of different spaces. And when your enemy's enemy is your friend in this kind of attack, it really does begin to cause trouble.
All I would say is that, he wasn't alone in that leadership election, and people who wanted further left politics voted for Rebecca Long-Bailey.
No, not all of them. Not all of them. I mean, like if Zoe was here, she would say
I
she
understand.
would challenge you.
But
quite
a lot
strongly
of
on
them
that.
did. So what I'm saying is it's not like it was a completely united party at that point.
No.
There were a lot of people who wanted basically the Corbyn successor and didn't get the Corbyn successor that would always be looking for an opportunity to stick the boot in. There is, of course, a slice of people who voted for Starmer, believing that
he was soft left.
That he was soft left, and his counter argument has been and will continue to be that then the pandemic happened and Ukraine happened, and if the economy is in such dire straits that we can't really afford to implement the program that we were promising in 2019.
What do we think about Kemi Badenoch calling on him to resign in her third ever week at PMQs. Normally, it would take quite a lot longer for a leader of an opposition party to call for the resignation of another.
Always.
And everybody today has just been commenting on that very negatively, even from among her own ranks. It seems that, she has shot her load very early. What does she now have left to attack him with? When I look back over what's happened since she's been leader, she has been on the record as opposing Labour's national insurance rise, not opposing Labour's national insurance rise, supporting Labour's investment plans, opposing Labour's inheritance tax plans, opposing Labour's plans to levy VAT on independent schools, opposing Starmer's hobnobbing at the G20, opposing the government's EV targets, which Starmer says she signed off when she was business secretary not so many months ago. So it feels like first impressions do matter and that hers are pretty all over the place.
In my view, it reflects a complete lack of experience and very poor advice.
And it's strategically also really very stupid because she basically does Farage's job there when she has to distance herself from Farage.
That is a really good point, because the consequence of her firing that nuclear missile, which you save for the right moment always as leader of the opposition, because what will happen now? What will happen now is every week that Starmer doesn't resign, and he won't, she looks impotent. And that's a lot of weeks to wait.
I'm told she's being advised by Priti Patel.
Great.
Ahead of her PMQ.
Yeah, so maybe,
appearances. So that might explain.
I mean, there is another problem in that we don't know really what she stands for. You've highlighted some of the stuff there. But if you're going to start saying Starmer has to resign, at that point, it becomes quite legitimate for everybody else to say, well, that's fine. What do you stand for then if you think you're good enough to replace him? And that opens a real Pandora's box for the Conservatives right now from a policy perspective.
As we came to record, of course, Kemi Badenoch was giving a speech to win back support from Reform and Labour, she claims, pledging that the Tories would review all immigration laws and treaties, including ECHR and the Human Rights Act, bring in a numerical cap on immigration, publish all data on costs and benefits, introduce a new approach to citizenship. It would not be an automatic right, zero tolerance for foreign criminals. So that infers quite a bit of tolerance for domestic ones, and bringing in effective deterrent. So she went very, very heavy on.
So what does that mean, citizenship not being an automatic?
I don't know. Is this a Shamima Begum kind of thing? Like, we reserve the right to strip you of your citizenship if we don't like how you behave as an individual? I don't know.
She's all over the place. Like today in PMQs, again off the cuff, just like you should resign. Because she thought she was being very clever, basically. He said she keeps disagreeing with us, but she won't tell us what she would do differently. And she got up and said, you should resign and you'll find out what we would do differently. And then also off the cuff, she... it did make me laugh because she got up and said, we passed the budget in March and we didn't have tractors blockading Whitehall. And it's like, you did.
Duh.
The last big farmer protest was in March. Here are the photos. And they were protesting you specifically. They were protesting the trade deals that you signed. You can't even hang this on Sunak or Jeremy Hunt.
No.
They were protesting your policies personally. And it's like, why would you do that?
There seems to be a lack of researcher or advisor behind her.
They've had to fire a lot of people.
Because, she keeps making these mistakes. No?
I advise listeners to go and look at Priti Patel's face behind her, who went, and then kind of
froze.
The memory came back.
As she thought, oh shit, they were.
What a load of nonsense, Mr. Speaker. We had a budget in March this year and tractors were not blockading the streets of Whitehall afterwards.
This is unprecedented to see this in the middle of London. Farmers are here targeting Westminster because they want the government to listen. Lining Whitehall, these farmers are shining a glaring light on their livelihood. Brexit trade deals are allowing substandard food products into the UK. These are products that might be grown with chemicals that would not pass British farming standards, and they say that is undercutting British farmers. The second problem is labour shortages. They say they are hugely understaffed in this area, and it's putting huge pressure.
And I'm really keen to know why you think Elon Musk is so obsessed with the UK. The number of times he tweeted about the UK, Starmer in particular, obviously all very pejoratively within the space of a couple of days. It was like 30 times or something. And he's continuing, and he's really promoting this petition, and he's getting involved in all sorts of domestic UK issues, it seems, from wherever he is, Mar-a-Lago or wherever. Why do you think he is? Why is he so obsessed with the UK right now? Is it purely because Sunak was his mate?
No, I don't think so. I don't think he does it only here. He does it in Germany too. I mean, he did a tweet the other day, Olaf Scholz ist ein Narr in German. Olaf Scholz is a fool, the German chancellor. He's not doing it only here.
Oh, so we just don't notice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He does it I think he does want to bring down the EU and the rule of law of liberal democracy, because that's in the way of his kind of tech bro thinking. I think he's particularly focused on Britain at the moment because they have Farage as their way in. And I think that's their plan. And I think Farage is still keen on taking over the Tory party. He will eventually, who knows? It's a possibility.
Yeah.
Kemi Badenoch is so weak, and you can see that. And she's between a rock and a hard place. They cannot get back the voters who voted for the Lib Dems and the Farage voters. This won't work. They will always fall in a hole in between.
Yeah.
So I think Farage is just waiting for that, and they can easily stage another riot. The petition is just one thing in this big game of chronically and constantly undermining Starmer and the Tories as well. Badenoch should be more afraid even of Farage than Starmer.
Of course, part of the strategic mistake of calling for Starmer to resign now is that in 5 years, maybe people will have forgotten some of the stuff that went on under the Conservatives. In 5 months, they haven't.
Yeah.
So if you put the choice back in front of them, they're going to go, we'll try option C. It is so obvious.
Yeah,
It is just so infuriatingly an inane thing to do, to call for an election now, because there's a petition going. Trump levels of, I just saw something on TV, so I'll say it.
While we're on Musk, I do want to ask you both about the electric vehicles issue and what you think about it. Starmer reminded Badenoch that the target that she's complaining about was her target, as I mentioned earlier. Do you think a different target would ease the situation, or what's really going on with the whole EV debate?
Having the same problems in Germany at the moment.
The Chinese are just better and quicker.
Yeah, and the truth is their product at the moment is better as well and cheaper. There were job losses in February. There were job losses in June with a slightly more generous target.
Yeah.
And the manufacturers were citing they can't compete with Chinese imports at the moment. And we're now in a situation where we're looking at Trump possibly starting some kind of tariff war. And the EU,
35%.
And the EU putting up tariffs, which might mean like a massive dump of products by the Chinese here. And at the same time, you can't really participate in that, because I was reading some data on the market. And like our traditional car manufacturers in Europe, like BMW and Porsche, they depend massively on exports to China.
That's right.
So that would hurt the same companies that are struggling. Again, that's how trade wars brought the depression last time round. And so it's a pickle. I think the only thing you can do is tinker a little with demand side. Offer incentives, basically, offer tax incentives or whatever to people to buy electric vehicle, make the charging network much better than it currently is, to try and increase demand, because supply is problematic and it will keep being problematic.
The supply will continue to be the elephant in the room, the supply side issues, because, of course, China is supporting its EV manufacturer with huge state subsidies. It's making it cheap to manufacture them.
And all the batteries in the European ones are Chinese anyway.
And China, thanks to Belt and Road, owns the bulk of the raw materials as well. There's so many issues built up there, and it's a global shift. It's not a UK or a European thing. It's one of these epoch-defining shifts that's happening right now.
The wider point, I guess, is this. Is this a symptom of the age we're living in, where the normal thing now is going to be for opposition leaders to stand up and say, Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor just got ratioed on Pinterest for their position. I mean, you laugh, but it's not more ridiculous than everything currently going on in global politics. Or is it actually that the problem is our electoral system? Because you get parties in government with massive majorities that are not reflected actually in real support.
Alex.
What?
You must really love me.
I do.
I haven't mentioned PR for
I know.
weeks.
I know.
Are we there again now?
I just lobbed a soft tennis ball at you and you're sitting there holding a big racket.
You should see the size of the smile on Naomi's face right now.
Anyway, moving on. So what are our calls to action?
Well, get off X.
Yeah.
Not already. If you haven't already, I am not abandoning it in terms of deleting my account. I'm only retweeting content there. I am not giving them any new intellectual
I'm not
brain
engaging.
thought.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm doing the same.
I'm doing all of my original content on Blue Sky, and I'll just be sharing anything that I think does warrant sharing.
Yeah,
on it.
or our own commercial, basically, content where we're saying, come listen to our podcast. I mean,
And if you want to support PR, there is actually a government petition running at the
I
moment.
know.
So a parliamentary
can
petition.
we try and make this the petition that goes viral
65
among
million.
among people who are really annoyed by the other petition? Because there is at the moment an open petition for proportional representation.
And if you are about to reply to us or write into us saying, oh, but you're worried about Farage, then therefore you don't want PR, please can you email Annette, who will explain to you the background of how Hitler won under a first-past-the-post system and would have come to power much sooner if it hadn't been for PR before that.
And also, pollsters did a map of France
Under first past the
post.
Le Pen.
And it's a lot worse.
Although I have to say, under PR, it can also go terribly wrong.
Of course. Listen, it can go wrong under any system. All I'm saying is that part of the reason why people can feel that we just had an election and they can demand another one 4 months later?
Yeah, certainly, yes, as well,
in
a way, yeah. I mean, I also would always say PR is the better system, but we have
Our
discussed
system
that.
gives unlimited power to an extreme party, whereas in a proportionate system it is much less likely. Look, we're not talking about PR.
Thought she
Probably
was
also
out,
preaching to the
they
converted.
pull her back in.
No, it's done. We'll come back to that another time. It is time once more for Alex to wade through the global diatribe and bring us the latest Wokey Dokey.
Wokey Dokey.
Alex, we're all ears. What have you brought us this week?
Go woke, go broke, they said. Are you sure now? Exhibit A, my lad. Wicked. That is breaking basically every record.
So this is Wicked the movie?
Yeah, Wicked, the film of the musical. Its opening weekend has broken every record going, and it's a big weekend in the States, you see, because of Thanksgiving. It's making money hand over fist. The anti-woke brigade are not happy. The Mail, for instance, says Wicked is woke because munchkins are full size, which I thought was quite interesting. Like, if you include diverse casts, they complain. If you don't, they also complain. That's an interesting one. I quite liked one ex-user who vented his frustration that the co-stars would suggest that the land of Oz, and I quote, has always been a queer place. You see, that's what they said. and he asked, "Since when?"
Oh boy.
Hold my beer.
So I was cast in The Wizard of Oz at school in the High School Musical as a Sorceress of the North.
Okay.
I did, of course, audition for Dorothy,
But you were just allowed to be a friend of Dorothy.
I looked like a very good witch rather than a very young prepubescent girl. I was 14. So my friend Inga was cast as Dorothy.
What a bitch.
Inga was tone deaf, so she didn't sing in tune one of the songs. Anyway, yeah, we'll leave that. I'm not bitter in any way. But what I will say is I think that was...
If you're listening, Inga.
I think my moment as a gay icon was born during that production.
I know a gay. His name is Paul. And Paul is so nice. But Paul only like two things. He like ass and Judy Garland. And that's all. What kind of life is this?
I mean, come on. It's The Wizard of Oz. What are they talking about? It's Judy Garland,
Friends
it's
of
the
Dorothy.
gayest film there's ever been. And suddenly they're going, oh, they've made it all queer. Finally, I want to address someone on my Facebook. This is an actual person.
That you met?
That I have met. Unsatirically complaining. So it's racism if a white actor blacks up or Bradley Cooper makes his nose bigger. But it's absolutely fine for Cynthia Erivo to paint herself green. What are the woke rules?
My God.
I want listeners to take a moment and sit with that thought. Like, what is it they're actually asking for a real green actor to get the part? Who is the discriminated upon group?
I've got the Hulk on the phone here.
Shrek.
Did one of the Ninja Turtles audition and get turned down? What is happening here? So let me respond directly to you on the rules. The rules for you are these. Step away from your computer. Seek help. Eat plenty of oily fish. Do not be left near a keyboard unattended.
Thank you, Alex.
You're welcome.
Quiet, riot.
At the start of the month, Chancellor Scholz's three-party coalition collapsed. German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier has approved the timeline for early elections agreed to by Germany's main parties, saying the plan to hold the vote on February 23rd was realistic. The centre-right CDU/CSU is flying high in the polls at 33%. Well, for Germany, that's high. And for
Labour in the UK,
for the UK it's
enough.
high, in fairness. The SPD is making small gains from a very low point, it has to be said. The AfD has kind of stalled. So this may have seemed like a good idea at the time, but terrible economic news has intervened. Layoffs are about to hit German auto and steel workers, much for the same reasons as here, and unions are threatening large-scale strikes. So the landscape feels like it's made out of quicksand.
Yeah, very much so, yeah.
Annette, some basics first. Why did the coalition collapse in the first place?
The coalition has basically collapsed a year ago already. I mean, it was completely dysfunctional over the last year or so, which had to do with basically two things. There were three parties from which two of them, the Liberals and the Greens, were very much at the opposing ends of the political spectrum. So that didn't go well together. The Liberals were more like market-free Liberals, FDP, like no taxes, and whereas the Greens are net zero, let's invest more. And this could have worked because normally we Germans do coalitions well and are used to that. But there was no one leading this thing because Olaf Scholz proved to be a terrible chancellor, as he didn't really lead this coalition or held it together. But he just basically looked at them fighting and played the referee instead of leading this government. Right. And that ended in a total dysfunctionality. I mean, there were agreements made that were then leaked to the press, that were then disputed by the Liberals mostly. They were the most destructive part. And in the end, I think Olaf Scholz had enough. and saw that this couldn't go on anymore. I personally found that deeply irresponsible, the way they did it, because first of all, it was on the evening of the Trump election. I was just collapsing into bed after having watched...
Not now, Germany.
I said, not now, Germany. It was really one of those days where you think this cannot be true.
Germany says, hold my Stein.
I forgot that, of course.
Yeah, it was the weirdest day. And then also the way Scholz did it was completely weird, I thought. He just went in front of the cameras and insulted the liberal finance minister and fired him live on camera, basically, without him knowing about it. This whole thing was so destructive and not exactly helpful when you want to restore trust in democracy.
And very un-German.
Un-German, and really, it was just nasty. Angela Merkel, by the way, we will maybe touch on later, who just published her book yesterday in Germany and was asked in numerous interviews about what happened with this coalition. She just looked at the interview and said, well, man. That was the most direct. She's a free woman now. So that's basically what happened. And
that's perfect.
And then Scholz should have been immediately imposed as the new candidate for this election. And then what happened is, and that makes it even worse now, is that then suddenly the party wasn't so sure anymore whether they really wanted him, because he's the most unpopular politician, Olaf Scholz. Rightly so, in a way, I think, after what he did in Germany, while the party at the same time has the most popular politician in Germany, the defense minister Pistorius, as well. So we have now these snap election. It's very fast for Germany, February. Yeah. And instead of straight away saying, okay, we go with Scholz, the SPD, the Social Democrats, started a hugely damaging debate on whether they should have Pistorius or not over 10 days. So now, in the end, Scholz, stubborn as he is, said, no, I'm going to do it. And Pistorius pretended he had never even thought about this. So now they're both damaged. Scholz is damaged even more. And he will now sort of go into this thing, currently polling at, I don't know where he is at the moment,
15%.
Yeah, something like 15% behind the AfD.
The aggregate, yeah.
Behind 15%. The far right. He's very confident that he will win. I mean, he's sort of never really been very good at criticizing himself. But this will be very difficult.
He will win what? I'm sorry.
The election. He gave an interview.
He will catch up to the CDU on 30%.
He won't, but that's what he claims.
Okay.
And this is difficult because...
Shades of Joe Swinson there, I feel.
He does say that, or he does really believe that, I think, because at the last election, he was also behind and then in the end made it through. But that was just by accident, because the two other candidates both made major mistakes a week before the election. So the basis on which he founds that conviction that he might make it in the end is quite slim. And
and also CDU's lead has been really stable for like a year and a half.
I mean, why would you vote for a chancellor that has ruined the last government? And if you have a new chance now.
The interesting thing, though, is that it is FDP and the Greens that are being really punished.
Squeezed.
Yes.
In the polls. They're both down.
Well, the Greens are okay. I mean, they are polling around 11% at the moment.
Yeah, around 11, but they were, they had...
They were better last time, but
they sort of reached a high of 18, 19.
Yeah.
So.
But I mean, they had a very bad government. They made a few mistakes. They were bashed by the right-wing press. I mean, they had a hard time. And I think if they poll around 11%, they could be quite happy.
Are they being blamed for net zero targets and
I mean, that's
EV?
It's a bit like here.
Yeah.
I mean, they have been very prominently, of course. I mean, they're the Greens fighting for net zero, for a new heat pump law. I don't want to go into the details. That went really wrong. I mean, that was like technical mistakes the Greens did there in government. Yeah. And all that led to the right-wing press really bashing them on a daily basis. I think they won't do that badly in the end in these elections. I mean, it would be good because they're the most like kind of social democratic party we have. They're different from the Greens here. They're way more mainstream.
So if I asked you to bet money at the moment on what the next election might look like, are we looking at another grand coalition, basically?
Very possibly. I mean, barring a miracle, Friedrich Merz, the chancellor candidate for the Conservatives, which is a centrist right party like the Tories before
Yeah.
Brexit, basically. He so far ahead in the polls. He should be the next chancellor, barring a miracle. You never know these days. But he will not poll high enough to form a government on his own. So he will have to do a coalition, most probably with the SPD, which would be a grand coalition, but quite probably with a third partner if the SPD keeps polling so low.
Mm-hmm.
But in any way, the good news in this is that we will 90% have a coalition of mainstream centrist democratic parties.
So has he already completely rejected the possibility of doing a coalition with the Alternative?
Yes, all the democratic centrist parties have completely put up the firewall and said we will not work together with them. So the AfD is at the moment polling around 18%, so that is not too bad. I mean, nationwide, if it stays there, the danger is always when they come over 30%, because then they get this kind of blocking minority, which is a problematic thing, because then they can block votes on constitutional affairs. And that would make life very difficult if they came above 30%. That happened in Thuringia. And now they can really make life very difficult for the government. They govern without governing.
Well, I'm relieved to hear that you're predicting a sort of centrist, moderate-ish outcome for this election. What will that all mean, do you think, for Ukraine? Because when we talk about Ukraine, we so often talk about Germany, the UK and the US. Do we think that there might be, any difference between now and the election in terms of what Scholz does, rather like we've seen Biden do in his last few months? And what do you think it might look like for Ukraine under a new grand coalition?
Let me start with Scholz first. Scholz has sort of followed or pursued a very strange strategy over the last 2 years of this war. He has, on the one hand side, Germany has delivered more military equipment and ammunition than any other European country. At the same time, he kept saying, we should be cautious, Putin is a dangerous man, and I'm the one who will protect you from him and from us joining the war, which was a very schizophrenic strategy, because why would you spend so much money on a country when they're at the same time afraid of helping them? And I think that did sort of play into the hands of parties like the AfD and the BSW, who are pro-Putin, who want Germany to not pay any money more or not equip Ukraine anymore. I thought that was not a very good strategy. It partly has to do with the Social Democrats, who have this strange appeasement history with Russia from early on as a party. And this strategy is something he apparently, I've just seen his first speeches since it's clear that he will be the candidate for Chancellor of the SPD. His first speech was very much sort of amplifying and strengthening this sort of schizophrenic strategy. He really now plays the peace chancellor. Peace is how the AfD tries to play the pro-Putin narrative. And now he says, I'm the peace chancellor. I'm the one who will protect you from Germany entering or being part of this war. And there is a huge anxiety in Germany already. I mean, it feels completely different when you're in Berlin or in Warsaw than when you're in London. It's irrational, but somehow I feel a bit further away from. In Germany, you do have real anxieties. And what Scholz does is he just increases these anxieties. And I think that is a very dangerous strategy. Because Putin can rub his hands. That's what Putin wants. He wants Germany to be afraid.
The whole time you're describing like his mistakes, I can't help but think of Starmer. This weird thing of doing the right thing but not saying it.
I mean, towards Ukraine, Starmer was very clear.
Decision and the slight comms.
It's a bit similar, but I mean, I would say Starmer is a better politician than Scholz, I mean, personally. I think Scholz has to partly appease his own party, the part of the Social Democrats that have always been on sort of a strangely romantic relationship with Russia. Gerhard Schröder, who is a big friend of Putin. I mean, who declared him as a super Democrat once he left office, only to join the board of Gazprom, who's still part of the Social Democratic Party. Imagine. Scholz has to do that because parts of the Social Democrats want that and do believe that we should get gas back from Russia and friends with them. Partly he thinks it's a good election strategy because the Christian Democrat leader, Merz, who probably will be the next chancellor, is way more clear when it comes to Ukraine. He says we have to support them and this is important and we do not want Ukraine to lose. So he's much clearer there. And I think very much depends on how clear the Christian Democrats, the CDU, will win. And if Friedrich Merz has a clear majority in this coalition, I think the policy of Germany will be much more supportive of Ukraine, not only in deeds, but also in words, which is important these days.
Merkel has been quite prominent in recent weeks.
Yes.
She just had her big autobiography released. It's making a lot of splashes. Has she said anything about the upcoming election?
Yeah, I mean, that was really interesting. I mean, she's presenting her new autobiography, which was really like everybody waited for this day. Yesterday, in a big theater in East Berlin, on stage, being interviewed by one of my colleagues. And she mostly was quizzed about her legacy. I mean, her autobiography is sort of basically trying to defend her reputation and her legacy, because she left her chancellor office in a blaze of glory. I mean, she was the most popular politician, and then came Putin, invaded Ukraine, and ever since her reputation lies and her legacy lies in shatters.
Because she's the one in many ways that really hitched her wagon to Russian gas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Germany had, I think, 40% of its energy came from Russian gas when she started, and when she left office, it was 55%, so she increased that. And that was after Putin invaded Crimea. So she knew Putin. I mean, she knows Putin really well. She speaks Russian, being an East German politician originally, and he speaks German. And they really, I mean, she always said, I'm under no illusion when it comes to Putin. But then you could really ask her, but why did you then not wean Germany off Russian gas earlier? And that is something that I found really interesting, because
what's her answer?
She said at the time it was the right decision because we wanted to keep Putin in the room somehow. That was this famous Wandel durch Handel. I mean, political change through economic trade and relationships.
I mean, if you are an avid pro-EU-ophile, not pro-European, then that is a central point of it. Trade reduces war.
The interesting thing was that she refused to say whether this in hindsight was a mistake or not, because she very much wants to defend her reputation. That was a bit disappointing, and that also makes the book, I think, a bit boring, because she very precisely gives details of what she did when. It's very much apparently the autobiography of a scientist, but of a German scientist, and as dry and sober as she was then, it apparently is now as well. And she totally, stubbornly, defiantly refused to admit to any mistakes she made. She said you have to see them in the historical context, which is right, because at the time, everybody wanted that cheap Russian gas. And that was the mainstream opinion. I mean, that only changed after Putin invaded. Nobody wanted to talk about that before. Insofar, she's right, but it was a bit disappointing that she wouldn't look at it from today.
I've got one last question. We've seen Russian interference in lots of elections around the world. We've seen some pro-Putin candidates doing very well in elections around Europe in recent months. Are there signs of Russian interference yet in this election?
In the German one, I'm sure they will try that, and they have tried that before. I think they have massively enhanced their troll factories when it came to East Germany, because that's an easier way in. Putin himself has said at some point, or was one of his presenters on some Russian TV, that Germany is an easy target. So definitely, he's basically meddling everywhere. I mean, if you just look at Romania, there is a presidential elections, and suddenly out of the blue came this guy, Georgescu, who nobody had ever heard from, who did his whole campaign pro-Putin through TikTok.
Yeah.
I mean, hello? I mean, that very much smells and tastes like Russian interference. So I think he's basically everywhere, and Moldova is the same. And that's all countries that have borders with Ukraine. So he's slowly creeping forward.
Well, call to action then. What should our listeners do?
Two things, I guess. Join a union. I know that sounds like a strange
party
thing to say, but unions have really strong anti-far right pan-European
Network.
and international networks. And they often get together and take sort of action across borders. And then the other one I would suggest is ENAR, which is a European anti-racism network. And they do a lot of good work, and we'll drop a link in the show notes. You can go and see what they're up to and, sign up to their newsletter, etc. And now it's that time of the week when we stop and say, remember, not everything is shit. It's time for Grin and Share It.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me. Good news. Do-de-o-do-lo, do-de-o-do-lo, I want good news.
Naomi, what made you marginally less apoplectic this week? And I know that would have been a challenge because you've had quite a week.
I have had quite a week. Well, in homage to our producer,
Oh.
Scottish Kenny Campbell,
Oh.
I have found a lovely story from Scotland, showcasing a wonderful bit of Scottish engineering. We've covered good news stories about animals, about the climate, about medical intervention, but we haven't really done much on infrastructure, and I love infrastructure. So there is...
Said no one ever.
Sorry. We did an entire quiet riot on how the railways are going to fix everything in
This
Britain.
is true.
So
this is
that
true.
is-
You
and
love
it's very
infrastructure.
popular. Listen up.
She goes to
Pipe
underground clubs. They discuss infrastructure.
On the Northern Line.
Dressed as trains.
Actually, it's Bakerloo Line extension that I'm most keen on. There is a new movable bridge that will span the Clyde, and it works as a drawbridge, but horizontally. So it's a swing bridge. And it's one of the world's first large double leaf swing bridges, to use the proper term, and it's going to allow boat traffic to pass by swinging each half of the bridge like the paddles in a pinball machine, if you like. And the new Clyde River Bridge...
so you get on one side...
Right.
And it spins you around.
So
Wow.
the new Clyde River Bridge is a centrepiece of a £140 million revitalisation project for communities on both sides, the Clyde waterfront and the Renfrew riverside. And it's got a motorway, bike path, pedestrian walkways, and will be the first new crossing point for any vehicle across the Clyde since 2006. It's going to create opportunity for business, workers, commuters, everybody, and bring lots of economic benefit to the area. And I think it sounds really exciting. It's rotating on a vast, cylindrical bearing on the earth of the riverbank on either side. And the bridge's two decks measure 213 feet. They meet in the middle, and their 88-foot long back spans, or part of the bridge that projects over the land behind it, incorporates 500 metric tons of counterweight. Most complicated movable bridge I've ever designed, said Florida-based Jim Phillips, the lead bridge designer. And I think it's a lovely bit of engineering.
We need to
should all
find
go and look at.
video, I think, and drop that in the notes.
That's very much in keeping with Scottish infrastructure culture. Obviously, one of the most famous tourist attractions in Scotland is the Forth Bridge. But in Falkirk, there is the world's only rotating boat lift. 35 metres high, the boats sail in, and it's like a London Eye. And that's become a huge tourist attraction as well. It must be more complicated than a horizontal one. Anyway, I applaud that in a Scottish accent. Thank you.
Grin and Share It. We'll drop a link, maybe to a video of it.
And once again, we're out of time, and that's the end of the show. Our huge thanks to Annette Dittert.
Pleasure, and thanks for having me again.
Thank you for coming, Annette. We'll have you back soon.
Anytime. And as soon as the election result is known, we're going to get you back in. Yeah. Listeners, we make all of our content available freely to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. But we do want to show our love to everybody that is able to bung us a bit of cash to help us keep this show on the road. Our Ko-Fi supporters quite literally pay for themselves and for those of you who can't.
So Naomi, Kenny and I will be hosting an Ask Us Anything video chat online on 9th of December at 6 p.m. You really can ask us anything.
Invites are going to go out on Monday, this coming Monday, the first Monday in December, to anyone that has signed up to back us. So if you haven't done that already, you can do that, and you would like to be involved in this, make sure you've signed up by then give us your email and head over to ko-fi.com/quietriotpod. That is ko-fi.com/quietriotpod within the next few days.
We'll be back over the weekend, but if you miss us terribly in the meantime, drop us a line to quietriotpod@gmail.com or find us on Blue Sky at quietriotpod.
But for now, thank you for tuning in and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
We love you.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreu and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta, artwork by Simona Canelu. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Soundstone Global.
Quiet Riot. I'm not at my most entertaining best today either, so we all will dawdle along.
We shall edit in some German jokes, don't worry.
Yeah.
Speak for yourselves. I feel fabulous.
You look great.
You look fabulous.
Today's my chance
Annoyingly.
to shine. And now it's time. With what?
Why did you say that so
I have no idea. I have no. Well, I didn't say it like that. And now it's.